Hi everyone, welcome to another DVIC Masterclass. Today we have a very special Christmas edition with the founder and inventor of Data Vault as well as our normal regular panel. So Dan, welcome to the show. Welcome to the Masterclass. Thanks for
Thank
joining.
you. I'm glad to be here.
And Michael and Knowles, hi again.
G'day.
Thanks for coming along.
Hey.
So I guess for those that may not know, who may be new to the world of Data Vault, Dan is actually the creator and inventor of Data Vault and leads the Data Vault Alliance. So Dan, we might get you to just start with a little bit of an update on the Data Vault Alliance, what's new, what's happening, and obviously how can our members find DVA and what can they find?
Right. Thank you. So Data Vault Alliance is moving forward. We're getting ready to launch across all of our ATPs and our certified instructors, Certified Data Vault 2.1 practitioner. And it's going to bring with it all of the sweet things that everybody is looking at or doing, everything from medallion architecture and why we already have it in Data Vault landscape to data lakes, lake houses, and why that's already part of it and how you work with it. And so we're going to be talking about data hubs and virtualization and fabric tools and all kinds of wonderful new things, including AI and ML applied to ingesting and connecting with audio, video, images, and documentation. Now, that said, we're also going to blast out a whole bunch of new courses for advanced and intermediate. So you can, if you're already certified, you can come back and get more training in specific areas around what to do to pre-process your data if you've got audio, image, documents, and so on. There's a set of methodologies that come once again from the Data Vault methodology landscape that provide you repeatable patterns to build those things. The only other thing I'm going to say, and of course, we're also launching a lot of business courses free. And of course, if you go to datavaultalliance.com, you can find a free membership to our members platform. And there's a ton of content there for the free members that came from our past years of conference recordings. So if you think it's hard to get knowledge on Data Vault, don't think it's hard anymore. It's really easy now. You just sign up for free and you've got access to 3, 4, 5 years worth of videos from speakers like Michael and Knowles and others in the industry who've come to the conference and presented on Data Vault year over year. So some really good stuff. The last thing that we've got is a professional membership on Data Vault Alliance to help with the community. And the professional membership is a low subscription. You can see all the benefits if you go to learn.datavaultalliance.com. There's a whole host of benefits there. The biggest one is you get Cindy and I every month on a 1 to 1.5 hour coaching call. And sorry, it's a Q&A session, and it's an open floor Q&A. So bring your questions and we answer them live as best we can. And we record it. So any of those recordings are available to the pro members that sign up later. They can go back and watch one we did last month, right? So we just started last month. And then we have quarterly quarterly coaching along with that. And that's a bit more effort. So instead of reaching into your pocket and paying us, $3, $5, $10,000 to come on site and do an advisory or whatever, this is a chance for everyone and anyone to just get in on the ground floor and take advantage of asking me questions directly. So there you have it. We're going to restart podcasting soon in the new year, and away we go.
Yeah, and obviously, we try and work together. That you've got a very focused DV forum there, and lots of information for people. And this community is really just, I guess, about the social and the business aspects and creating that community. And so we would expect all our members to be essentially members for both. They're both free. They're here to help. That's the point of it. So I love that you've come on, and Merry Christmas and thanks for joining. Okay, guys, we're gonna jump into some questions, but the first question I have is back to Dan. So keep smiling, Michael. Keep smiling, Nils. We'll get there in a sec. So, Dan, I guess given that we have this opportunity to talk to you, let's talk a little bit about what's emerging, what's happening in 2024 what do you see from a market development or a technology development that's caught your eye?
I'll try to summarize this in short. And of course, I could spend easily 2 hours on this one question. Uh, yeah. So I'm going to rattle off a series of terms that I'm sure everyone has heard. So data lake house, Delta Lake, data hub, data fabric, data virtualization, data preparation, data governance, and on and on and on. I do think the word data is probably overused in some instances, and we should probably be talking about information instead of data, at least at the business level,
Mm-hmm.
and probably talking about both in reality. But where is Data Vault in all of this? Well, Data Vault has been taking its journey along this in terms of updates and moving forward. And if you look at the Data Vault architecture, you will see that we already have embedded the concepts necessary for using or utilizing a data lake just as it is. So if you understand a data lake, well, you can plug it in as your persistent staging area, or so to speak. And what that means is you got to release the thought that a persistent staging area is always relational, because that's not true anymore, and it hasn't been true for the last 7 years. So that's one thing. And then of course lake house, well, all that really means is that you've got a data warehouse on top of a lake, but it's more than that. Of course there's AI and ML at the table, at work, in production, real-time streams, and so on and so forth. So all of that leads to the data hub. And I realize there are about 6 different definitions out there in the marketplace, maybe more, for what a data hub is and isn't. Some of them are vendor driven and they're too narrow. In my opinion, the data hub, and we do define this for everybody coming in the new videos and the new bits we're going to release to the market in public. But a data hub is lots of lake houses and lots of lakes together, including operational source systems, along with consumption at the AI level, all the way through data catalogs and virtualization and so on and so forth, that span the globe. So you've got multiple geographies participating in this enterprise data hub. And that includes master data, and that includes audit trails, and that includes, fabric. And so the other trend that we're seeing, of course, is, well, everybody's humming and hawing about this thing called medallion architecture. I gotta say, take a back seat, folks, because medallion architecture is nothing more than 3 little labels of bronze, silver, gold on top of your quote unquote data lake, and then your curated or your warehouse, and then on top of your information, what we call the information delivery zone, right? So we've had this for years. There's nothing new under the sun with a medallion architecture. So really got to draw your attention to that if you're listening out there. Everybody thinks it's brand new and it's hot off the presses, and it's just more of the same stuff, just a different day with new labels. This is my opinion, and of course we'll want to hear from others on this. I'm almost done. Bear with me, guys. So then the other thing that we're hearing a lot about is AI, ML, large language models. I've been talking about this for a long time. I don't know if you remember, but many years ago, I presented something called dynamic data warehousing, and I told everyone that it was coming. It was a 10-year vision, and here we are 10 years later, and it's here, right? So imagine that, right? But I'm not the only one that got there got here from there, but this idea that you can use AI and ML in so many different contexts, not just to parse your data, but to understand gap analysis between ontologies, measure the gap between the ontologies, the business expectations, or the use cases captured in documentation, alongside of the models and what the reality of the operational systems are collecting. So if you can establish 3 points in a triangle, you can do something in mathematics called triangulation. And whenever you can do triangulation, you can apply triangulation math to discover distances and gaps and try to help close those gaps, right? So it's a gap measurement. And of course, that lends itself to vector analysis, but I'm getting off topic. So let's get back to the business here. AI and ML plays a huge role, or will, in the data vault landscape. It will play a role in terms of enabling faster automation and more agility at the team level. It will enable more agility in creation and discovery of the data set and relationships. It will enable discovery of business keys or potential keys that could be used to uniquely identify data sets over time. So there's all kinds of things. And one of the other things that AI and ML and large language models hopefully will do is begin to predict not only the type of data that you're going to see in the future, predictive analysis and all that. Everybody has a pretty good handle on that, but predict the types of BI analytical tables and queries that you might want to try to answer. In other words, hey, here's an area of your business that you weren't paying attention to, and the data says that this is growing, right? There's a huge impact here. And hey, look, you didn't even ask us for this. So there's no use case for it, but you should be looking at it. So here it is, right? We built the data, we put the stuff in there, we put it out on BI, all through the use of AI and ML. So discovery is a huge, huge area that needs a lot of insight. But Data Vault's going strong and getting bigger, and we're going to incorporate. And so this is the one of the last bits to this question. There's a whole lot more to this, but Data Vault's going to incorporate data fabric and data virtualization engines. And you've heard me say this. Everybody on this call has heard me say this before. The Data Vault physical model will change based on the performance of the platform you're on. That's one of the statements we make in class consistently. And we did it with Cassandra in Australia with you and Knowles and Certus,
Yep.
which is now Ignition. And then we did it with Michael and MongoDB and one of his customers at Scalefree in Germany a couple of years ago. Now, I think it's 7 or 8 years ago. And what we did was flatten the stores. And by flattening the stores, we get to use the technology the way it's built. Now, to be fair, both Cassandra and MongoDB engineers went ahead and added some features in order to support and enhance some of the joins and some of the stuff that we need, right? So I don't want to just say out of the box it worked, because it didn't. There were things that were done, but it was proof positive. And we also say this in class: the logical and the conceptual and the catalog, the ontology view of the business is far more important, always has been, than any physical data model we ever build. And so what's happening is there will be a transition, not for everybody and not for all use cases. I want to make this clear. And not everyone is going to go this route. And when they do, they're going to be doing it only for select use cases. And what I'm talking about is this idea that you will not build a physical data vault model in the raw sense anymore. And again, it's not for everything, right? So don't go thinking, we're going to throw out the entire raw data vault model and go this way. No, it's an addition to. You're going to use it for bits and pieces. And some of the bits and pieces will be covered by the technology known as data fabric, data virtualization tools, cataloging tools, and so on, federated query tools. So there's advancement enough in that industry and in that space and in the hardware behind it, in the cloud and so on, to make that fast and make it feasible. So you get the acceleration on those levels, and it's just phenomenal. What happens is at the raw data vault level or at the modeling level, when you do build objects, the things that you probably will build are pits and bridges or pit bridge hybrids. So that's sort of around the tree to answer that question. I went from the business all the way down into the tech layers. I lost a lot of folks, but there you go.
No, that's good. All right, so guys, let's bring Michael and Knowles into this chat. So with what Dan's just talked about, there's obviously a lot going on in the industry. Lots of new tech, not just the AI stuff, but but lots of other things are useful. So a big part of our audience are people who are new to Data Vault, young engineers that are kind of plotting the path of their career. So, Michael, let's start with you. What advice would you kind of give someone who's heading out? Where should they focus when when it comes to this landscape of technologies, what do you think is the important stuff to skill up in?
Right. I think what you see in the industry is essentially a trend for the data mesh, or it's a hot topic, right? And you see, I mean, it's the distribution of responsibilities to some extent, but also distribution of the solutions. So I think that's the trend. So having more distributed systems could be domain based, but it could be also in other regards, like distributing the enterprise data into different regions, what Dan just said, or into different, let's say, environments, but also highly distributing it into in operational sense. Think about cars or ships, for example, where you have the enterprise data warehouse essentially sitting on at the edge, essentially, right? So that's one thing. So highly distributed systems. That's what I think is one trend for the future. Virtualization, I fully agree. I think that the technology is getting there to virtualize more about the data vault, essentially, on top of data lakes and so on. And AI, to be honest. So I see AI coming. That's the other thing. So
yeah, and
that's
also
like
thanks, Michael. Sorry. So Nils, we've touched on AI about 40 times already in this conversation, so I'm gonna dive down there and then we're going to move on from AI for a little while. so AI is clearly going to touch the helping to build these platforms across not just the Vault, but helping use all these technologies. But it's also going to be used, or it's going to use data from the Vault or the Data Hub or the whatever we're calling it now, to help answer questions. So same for you. If you're starting out and you want to get into that, like how do you think about it as far as where to focus? Because it's changing so much right now.
Yes, to position the skill for the teams will be a particular challenge. New tools, new toys, new methods, new elements. So it's you need to get on the front face of the curve, so to speak, or the wave, as you like to experience, Julien, with the Gold Coast being right at your doorstep. And so, from that perspective, there will be a refresh in the marketplace of the different skills. But don't throw away the old principles and the old elements, because those do not really change. For those that have been around long enough, the medallion architecture is in fact the good old three-tier architectures of the mid-90s. And so, as Dan has said, there's nothing new under the sun, so a new label maybe. But the lessons learned from that is what really needs to stick. So with machine learning and with the architectures that come out, there are fundamental laws of nature that still pertains to what we are dealing with. So those things do not go away. So no, you're not irrelevant in a marketplace if you're not sort of a certified everything that has been mentioned. But it is certainly going to be an interesting time as we see these different technologies emerge to make sure that the principles remain intact, because if you don't, they will come back and haunt you. That's the nature of those principles, such the laws of nature remains the same, and as so it applies to information as well. As far as machine learning and those type of things are concerned, the challenge here is how to govern it. And so governance, and so data governance and management around those policies, etc., will become far more important. And for organizations that have a low level of information management maturity, this is going to be one of the barriers to entry, in that they need to pick up their game in those areas to really be able to get to the point where they can start leveraging all these new technologies. It's fantastic. We've always seen in the IT industry that technologies would lead, and then the business process eventually catches up. And so beware of the low maturity instances, so that you can guide appropriately as you go forward.
Yeah, it definitely feels like there's a lot of opportunity, but there's also a lot of risk. And if you're a large organization, you've got to be considering that risk, don't you? And you don't want to destroy your brand because you rushed a chatbot out that then starts getting abusive or something. But all right, let's leave that there. We're going to go to some of the user questions, because we've got a whole list of questions from the members, and I want to make sure we actually get to some of them at least. And obviously, if you're watching on YouTube or on the platform, drop more questions in. We're not going to get to them today, not a chance, but we will definitely get to them next time. or obviously there's the forums on the DVA platform as well. So, there's always lots of opportunities to ask questions there, and in the DVIC platform as well. So, lots of ways to get answers, but today we've got a list to get through. This is a really good one for me because the question came in separately to what just happened over the last couple of days in Australia. But for Dan and Michael, we had our second largest telco go down for 12 hours, like literally no landline, no internet, no mobile phone, more than 10 million people affected in a country of 25 million. That's a lot. Hospitals are affected, transport systems are affected, and it was chaos. And unfortunately, I happened to use that network. So it was an interesting day. The question's actually about resiliency. So, how do you build resiliency in your platforms, especially around your information hubs, when so much of where we're going is going to be based on, the data hub kind of idea? How do we start building resiliency into those systems when so much of it's automated and maybe a bit black box? Dan, let's start with you on your thoughts.
I'll try to keep it short. And everybody chuckles when I say that because I'm long-winded. But so the first is you got to have a good governance program. The second is that you've got to have you've got to have good security, and you've got to be aware of privacy laws, because in order to have resiliency, you need a platform that can support replication, and this includes replication in the cloud. Now, if you're talking about an outage like you just mentioned, you better not be replicating in a cloud inside your country, because your outage will be affected. Your outage will affect everything in your own country. And this is why you need a security program or a cybersecurity program along with good governance, so that you know what data you can replicate safely overseas or to another country, quote unquote, a friendly country, let's hope, right? Because there are laws against promoting data or copying data to an unfriendly, quote unquote, country. But it goes beyond that. The security officer needs to be able to define policies that dictate, well, if this data is leaving our country, this stuff better be two-way encrypted or one-way encrypted or encrypted this way or stored, this way. So there's lots of different ways, and you have to worry about in transit and everything else. Now, if you're using a platform like Snowflake makes it technically possible to copy stuff from country to country, cloud to cloud, just by turning it on. So without good governance, you run a lot of risk, right? Without good policies and without good understanding of security, you run a tremendous amount of risk. But the flip side of that is resiliency. So if you have good governance and you have good security, and you can follow the rules and meet the audits and the government regulatory agency bodies and all that, then you can leverage a cloud in another country as resiliency, as failover. But it still won't solve the accessibility problem if it's your telco that goes down, as the case you just mentioned, because everybody in that one country still can't get at their data. However, if you're a global organization, and here's where it pays off. If you're a global organization, the rest of the organization can still get at the data, even though the telco in your country is down. Now, this also begs the use of cloud technology, because when you come back online, the last thing you want is to scramble your IT resources to have them playing catch up, to have them funneling the data across and trying to figure out how to replicate the most recent copies and all that. You want the tech platform to take care of it for you, to recognize all of the stuff that would have changed or didn't change or did change while you were gone. And when you came back online, to resync those databases for you. So all of that stuff should be expected from whatever platform you choose to build this on. And so these are some of the things that I would think of.
Yeah, Michael, you got any thoughts? Is this just you must have multi-cloud, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, I would say, I remember, so here's the thing. So people make great plans and how to deal with certain scenarios. But the problem is, or what the number one, or what for me at least, a very important action, or a very important concept is, I remember one client where we essentially came to the office one day and working on some data warehouse project. That was actually before my data vault days, to be honest. But it doesn't matter. So we were sitting there, and when I came to the office, and everything was down, because just like in your country, nothing worked. So all the file shares where they had the data didn't work. It was production environment, production client in production, and they couldn't produce anything. No products. The factories were down. You couldn't work in the back. It was nothing. Well, first day we were making fun of it, the first day, but then end of business day, we got a bit curious what's going on, and then 2 days later, sitting there, I mean, everybody was heads down essentially. The problem was they made a plan for a backup, and they backed up for years, and it worked for a while, apparently, yeah. But then when they need to restore something, they realized nobody tested the backup, so it didn't work, right? And that's so testing, that's for me is a keyword here. I mean, we know a lot of tests in Data Vault, testing the metadata, checking for consistencies across the naming conventions, for example, or how you, let's say, turn a data set into a Data Vault, for example. We have regression tests, unit testing in Data Vault, how we test the business vault. We have tests for the raw Data Vault, and so on. But so many people don't do it. That's really weird, in my opinion. So I would really emphasize testing here. Yeah.
Yep. Good insight. Nils, do you have anything to add on this particular topic?
It's one of those things that for organizations that were impacted, some of them, this is not going to be cheap, because we've leveraged the scale of economy and the cost savings about going to places like the cloud and all of those type of things. No need to maintain your own data center and all those type of things anymore. And so that is then resulted in we've got all these savings, except it's not cheap, because the redundancies, the resilience has been neglected. So not for everyone, clearly, but some of the organizations out there, that's directly here in the Australian context, but I think it's a wake-up call to most organizations that some of them will have to go all the way from, okay, just upgrade my subscriptions, to actually bring the jackhammers because we need to put in more connections. And so there's going to be some literally physical and virtual impacts to all of this. But it's not necessarily a bad thing to have these reminders come around. And I say that from perspective. For instance, we had bushfires not far from our farm in the last little while, and we've had ideas on how to do and fight the bushfires, etc. And then when the bushfires became real, well, the measures became real, right? And so fortunately, all of our efforts were a dry run, which is awesome, but it highlighted a few things. And so I want to echo what Michael has said. It's one thing to have resilience. It's another thing whether you've tested it. And so absolutely. So sometimes these unfortunate incidents should form a good basis for getting some rigor or governance or resilience back into focus.
Yeah, and I feel like there's so many. So this isn't just a technical problem either, right? You've got to think at a business level, where are our single points of failure? In this example, everyone in their business used their own network. So as soon as their network was down, they couldn't communicate with each other.
Yep.
That delayed the fix by hours. So you have to think, and there's a cost to having a backup network or a backup to everything in your infrastructure, but you've got single points of failure, that's where it's going to fail, right? So, all right. Well, it's topical conversation. But all right, Dan, this one's probably just for you.
I got one more on that point just before we leave it.
Yeah, okay.
Critical resources or critical people in your company should probably invest in a global satellite phone, because that will allow them to link up to the outside world in a case like this.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And there's lots of ways. Like, I mean, they could have had subscriptions to their competitor networks, right? And that would solve their problem. But maybe they didn't want to
Yeah,
do that.
fault
So
tolerance
anyway,
isn't
well,
cheap. We learned that with the operational world and 9.9's uptime.
yeah, absolutely. All right, Dan, this one's probably just for you. This is a question. I'd really like to know if there's going to be a WWDVC in Europe again someday. Big fan of what's happening in the US, and I think it'd be great to be able to exchange thoughts and knowledge here in Europe. Maybe it's for you and for Michael. Any thoughts on that?
We are giving it some thought. We haven't discussed it with Scalefree or anyone else at this point. We haven't seen a draw, and of course, Scalefree is running Data Dreamland, which is a bit different and involves a number of other topics, which is great, I think. But WWDVC in Europe, well, if we can figure out through survey or through questionnaires or whatever that there is a demand and that people will come, then if it's financially feasible, we'll make it happen. So anybody who's listening, contact any of us, Jules, Knowles, Michael, myself, and let us know that you're
Yep.
interested. And the more people that let us know, the more chance there might be that that'll happen again.
Yeah. And for those that don't know, WWDVC is the Worldwide Data Vault Consortium event that Dan runs in Vermont every year, and I got to attend this year, and it was fantastic. So it's worth going, even if it's far, because I can tell you pretty much, unless you live right near me, it's not as far as it is for us to go, and it was still worth it. So, but it sounds like you've got at least one attendee already, so we'll start a tally.
Yeah. Well,
All right,
just if I may, last year at the conference here, we had Chris Date, CJ Date, from, if you've ever read
Yep.
any work from Cod and Date, that's one half of Cod and Date, right? So he is the original guy when it comes to data and data modeling and understanding. And if you missed that, boy, you missed. He did not allow us to record his session, so we do not have a recording online for that. And this is a real treat. We are currently talking to him. He might come back in May this year again. You don't want to miss this, folks. We had a number of business presentations, and we're probably going to do that again this year on Monday. So just a phenomenal time. It keeps getting better every year.
Yeah, that was really good. I enjoyed that presentation a lot. All right, guys. This is probably a more technical one. Have you ever worked on a project combining blockchain with Data Vault 2.0? And what kind of challenges do you think would rise, and how would you approach it? So let's reverse it up. Knowles, you can start with this one. Have you done a blockchain?
No, the blockchain is not something that I can claim any expertise on, so I'll leave it to the more experienced.
All right, Michael, do you have anything for us to help with that question? It's a good question.
We did something with the analytics of Bitcoins, essentially. There was something going on. I mean, it's the biggest challenge is data volume. So you need MP clusters for that. That's number one. And I remember the data, it wasn't Bitcoin, it was some other Lucy, whatever. I'm not fully in this topic, but Alex is. And I remember the delivery was really in batches from the. I mean, we went for long-term data, right, for analytics, and then the real-time feeds that we added later on. So I remember the blocks were quite large and quite heavy, and it was a data volume wise. But other than that, it was more or less a non-historized link, to be honest. So,
and do you have any insight for us?
I heard about Michael's project because Michael talked to me about it, so that was good. And I offered a little bit of advice along the way, but they did most of the engineering on that one. I wasn't directly involved, other than some advice on the side. I heard from one person about 6 years ago who was attempting to build a warehouse on top of blockchain, so to speak, and specifically Data Vault. And it was the same thing. Non-historized link, which for those of you that don't understand that terminology, think of it as a immutable fact or an audit log, basically. It's a structure in the Data Vault that houses an audit log for all intents purposes. And if you're going to do this, given the volume and the real time, you probably should look at either Data Lake or Lakehouse Technologies. or, Snowflake is a great candidate, or Google BigQuery if you're into that, or even now Microsoft Synapse is really good at. They've come a long ways, these technologies for this kind of thing. But that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I know that we haven't done any, and it's not a common thing, but it does show the flexibility of Data Vault, doesn't it? That you can actually, pick up a new use case that clearly we're not doing all the time, and still, there's already an existing artifact within the methodology that helps you do it. So I kind of like that story. I'm going to modify this next question a little bit because it mentions a particular vendor, and I don't want to ask opinions on vendor stuff. So, but what's your opinion on control versus velocity? So when developing Raw Vault, the approach is basically all developers test their own models and schemas to prevent overwrites, for example. So is control or velocity the right way to go? Do they have to be independent of each other? Michael, why don't we start with you on that one, and we'll go around.
Yeah. So as I said early on, I like distribution, right? So distribute systems, distribute responsibilities to some extent. But if you distribute responsibilities, you also want to standardize, or you have to standardize, to be honest, because otherwise you end up in chaos. So I like the fact that developers build their own components and test them by themselves to some extent. But there should be also tests, like integration tests, that test essentially the integration of their components into the bigger picture, essentially. And you want to really have standards in place how they build those components. That's my quick take on it.
Yeah. Nils, you got any thoughts there?
Governance. It's a single word, but that is fundamentally the challenge that you have with parallel, multiple independent teams. They still work in the same organization. They still have to contribute to the same organizational knowledge base. They still have to contribute to the enterprise memory as such. And so to do so, if you don't have the standards, thanks, Michael, to start off with, you're in trouble. And then there needs to be a governance forum. Yes, there's flexibility and autonomy, and you can have your own cadence and so on, but it still has to work. It's like trying to say, no, certain parts of your brain can't work together to the others. They do their own thing, and that's called schizophrenia. So, that causes all sorts of issues. Sorry for my somewhat crude example there, but that is really what happens at a data level if you do not have some semblance of governance and the standard set of patterns to integrate on.
Yeah. That executive function, I guess. So, Dan, have you got some insight here? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, everything that Michael and Nils said, I second to start with, right?
Yeah.
And then inside of governance, so you've got to have corporate governance. That has to be top down. Inside of corporate governance, you have to have a very good QA, quality assurance or quality control program in order to enforce governance, because the best governance in the world is not governance if you can't enforce it. Or worse yet, and this is a common mistake among organizations, they say we have QA QC, but then I ask them, does QA QC have the power to deny developers from moving things into production? And the answer almost always is no. And that's a problem. That means your governance is broken. That means you're going to get chaos all the way into test, because developers, myself included, are lazy, and we will do whatever we can to get away with the least amount of work possible to produce the outcome. That's just how we operate. That's human nature. So good governance is essential. Good empowering QA to enforce good governance and following the standards is critical. And then once you have that, QA QC says, I can bounce things back and I've got the authority to do so, and you will not, thou shalt not pass, to use a Gandalf line, from Lord of the Rings, right? And the staff goes down. But that's the kind of thing you want. And it's fine to have distributed teams and all of that, and develop, new ways of thinking and all of that. But there should be a process of maturity. So when a team or someone comes up with a new idea, they can push it through to the governance board and push it through to the QA board and either get it denied or get it approved for use across the board, right? So that's my thought.
Yeah, excellent.
And that goes
direct. I don't have anything to add.
And that goes directly into the topics of data mesh and all of those type of things, because that's essentially one of the most popular distributed team models that is now gaining traction in the marketplace. So the need for governance, the need for metadata management at the technical level is escalating by orders of magnitude from what it used to be. We always knew it was important, but with these type of efforts, it is now absolutely essential.
Yeah, I mean, standards, governance, that hasn't changed since we all started this, and I came in late on the journey compared to you guys. So, all right, Dan, this one I'm going to start with you because I've had this conversation with you before. It's a great question. So the question is, I'm curious what you think about building an operational system with Data Vault. Are there any changes to the reference architecture that you'd recommend?
Good question. And just a final point on governance. Federated computational governance is an idea in data mesh practices, but they don't tell you how to do it. In the Data Vault methodology, we tell you how to do it. And if we don't do that today, we will do that coming to a theater near you, right? To a trainer near you. But to answer your question on operational systems and Data Vault use, I've been doing that for years. I built my first operational Data Vault, quote unquote. What it is a data warehouse and an operational system on top. So there's no data movement, there's no ETL, there's no ELT, there's no nothing. It's just straight into the Data Vault through a data access layer and then out to the analytics right inside the operational program. They're all in one. And it's a beautiful solution. It's, again, I got to caution all the listeners. It's not for every use case. And it's not for an enterprise today. Because if it were for an enterprise, that would mean you would take SAP and throw it out, PeopleSoft throw it out, Oracle Financials throw it out, and you would consolidate everything. And we all know the boiling the ocean doesn't work. So forget that idea, right? Operational data vaults are a specific use case. Right? And when you find the right use case for operational, and if we back off the label Data Vault, we call this operational data warehousing. If you really want to use the hip term, you can call it an operational lake house, whatever. But it's the combination. It's the recombining of the operational system and the analytics system together. And you see this with Snowflake's advancements into the operational space and supporting operational apps inside of the same platform that was built for analytics to begin with. This will happen at the data management level. It'll happen in the data lake level. It'll happen at the technology level. It'll happen in Google Analytics, Google BigQuery, and so on and so forth. It will happen because there is a need out there. There is a need to move data less. And there's a statement I've been saying for a long time that says data will get too big to move and or restructure. And when you talk about an operational data warehouse, it really rings true. If you have a large set of transactions, and this is maybe where something like a blockchain example might work. Now, blockchain's in the ether, it's in the cloud, it's all over the place. You can't really pin it down as an operational system, so to speak, right? So maybe that's not such a good example. But when you build an operational data vault or an operational data warehouse, first off, it is possible. Second, it's a great idea. Third, it works perfectly if you understand the data access layer. And it fixes a lot of problems. It fixes the gap between extract and load. It fixes any transformations that would have gone on that don't need to go on. You apply your master data in one place. You apply your CDC in one place. It's all done right there on the fly as the transactions come in from the operational systems. It is very effective in addressing data quality issues on the spot, very effective in addressing a resource-intensive enterprise analytics. I remember this one person what I worked with in 2003. We built another one in 2007 before I left Denver, and it was hugely successful as well. But he had the sole job of running the entire analytics operational data warehouse underneath their brand new operational system. Now, to be fair, their CEO got on board with this, and I talked to them, and they wrote their own operational application on top of the data vault specifically to do this. So they did replace 2 or 3 external applications, but it took them 3 years. Okay, so don't think you're going to do this overnight, right? This is a journey. It's not a destination. But when they reached their destination, the CEO called me up from a golf course and said, the cost savings are unbelievable because the time, the intents, the resources. I've got my IT guy from my data warehouse. He had one guy, and all he's doing is building analytical reports, doing new stuff with data right there in the operational system. There was no ETL, there was no delay, there was no waiting for it. I mean, just on and on and on and on and on. So there's a lot of benefits to it. And the instructors know my story as well. But if you do this and in 2007, and I'll just one more, if I may, when we did this in 2007, we placed a data mining engine on top of the operational data collecting in the data vault in the warehouse. And what that did was multiply the response time. It took a 15-minute or 5-minute response time and took it down to less than 1 second back inside the operational application, which was a web app, and provided the insight directly to the viewer on the web app as they were going through. And in doing that, it enticed the person on the website to actually buy more product from them right there. So their profitability jumped. They went from I think a 3 million evaluation, and in the next 3 months they jumped to a 30 million evaluation, and then in the next 3 months they were $230 million evaluation as a result of these couple of actions, right? By combining. So it is a very powerful concept when it's used in scope and it's used for the appropriate use case. And again, it's not across the entire enterprise. You only want to do this in specific places. We built one more of these in Australia at a huge bank that I've mentioned to many of you before. And it's, I believe that one chunk is still running there. The rest of it has gone by the wayside because of management changes and personnel changes. But the one chunk that they did, they built an operational data vault chunk with a predictive analytics for getting new customers when they hit the website, and they ran an AI ML engine, similar process, and to get the new customer to sign up or figure out, what's their immediate risk score or chances of getting a home loan if they apply right now, and I think their home loans, their number of non-fraudulent home loan apps that were good jumped through the roof, and so they were making a lot more money off of this. There was some predictive component to it. So just some stories from the past, but it's certainly relevant today.
Am I right in thinking that the line's kind of blurring a little bit now with APIs for everything, very small apps for mobile and like for field workers and whatever else, and a fair bit of that coming from an operational part of the vault? Is the line blurring between operational systems and analytical systems?
Oh yeah, it's been blurring for a long time, albeit slowly. The pace of the blur has been increasing in the last 8 months. I mean, just hand over fist increasing because of things like AI and ML and large language models and so on. So the lines will continue to blur. So the esoterical question is, what is a source system? Can you sit there and tell me that an AI engine that's operating on, whether it's operating on operational data or data warehousing data, analytical data, that it isn't a source system of itself? And I think the answer is no, you can't tell me that, because it's generating new data that we didn't know before. So the AI engine itself is an operational application, right? Even though it's generating in some cases, analytical outcomes, and in other cases, operational data sets, right? So the consumer becomes the operational system, becomes the consumer. It's all one big circle. The line is definitely gray. And this whole blend of operational versus analytic, certainly from an outcome perspective, the line is fairly clear. Operational data is always current. That probably won't go away anytime soon, nor should it. Whereas the analytical data gives you all that data over time, including current, right? So there are two different perspectives when you look at them from a business, reporting aspect, to use a large context term, but from a from a systems perspective, from a use case perspective, there's stuff that we do in a data lake that we can't do in an operational system, and we're generating data at breakneck speed. Think about parsing an image, or parsing a document, or parsing a video or an audio file. What are you doing when you parse it? And when I say parse it, what you do is you feed it to an AI ML engine. You're doing something called feature extraction. And here's where Michael, if you need to step in and correct me, please do. He's got a big background in AI and ML, and a lot of people don't know that about him. But
don't tell anybody.
I just did, right? But yeah, so this is very, very important to watch these trends, but the lines are certainly blurring. And again, going back to Snowflake, you can see this line being blurred further. What is an operational support? Does it mean that because they added ACID compliance to their data store, that all of a sudden that they're operational? Who knows? How do you define it? I don't think there's a good way to separate the two in the future.
All right. Well, we've only got a couple of minutes left, and I've got a seasonal question to ask you. So I want rapid fire answer for this one from all three of you. So I have a large scale enterprise that has to make deliveries all over the world in a single night, with a massive workforce, lots of data sources, and an extremely tight delivery schedule. So how would you approach this particular enterprise starting their data vault journey? And let's start with Michael.
Small. So I would start small. Essentially, the data vault, when you think about this, is really you start with a small use case. We used to call this POC. Nowadays, it's the MVP, essentially, minimum viable product. Think about what's the low-hanging fruit here. So if you think about the bank, for example, the low-hanging fruit, to be honest, are the booking transactions. It's easy to model in data vault. Some non-HIS link, couple of hubs, couple of satellites, essentially, a bit roughly, right? But that's the basic idea, and it gives them high value. And that's how we start. Maybe you don't want to process all the booking transactions of all history. Maybe limit the history a bit for the beginning, but then you start adding more and more, because you don't want to deal with all the storage issues at the beginning, right? But then you add more and more capabilities.
And I think in this example, all the orders come in as letters, and they're only relevant for customers that are probably aged 3 to 10. And the delivery mechanism includes reindeer. So, Nils, have you got any insights?
They have to have the right infrastructure, and they have to have the right transport, and they have to have the right standards that are defined for it, and a singular governance body.
Yeah. And Dan, any final insights from you before we wrap this up?
Number one, people should listen to the recording from the webinar that Cindy and I did about building Data Vault in an agile fashion. Number two, Santa needs to make sure he feeds his reindeer superfood. Definitely. And
you have to watch out for the clouds.
Yeah,
right?
You got to watch out for the clouds. But to finalize that, I echo what Knowles and Michael said. Scope, 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 scope. Down scope. Fail hard, fast. Build, release, and iterate. Build, release, and iterate. You got to get data out in front of the BI users. This is the number one mistake that people make with Data Vault today. and they gotta stop getting stuck trying to put all the data into the vault before they get any results. They got to move it through and get it out and put it on BI, see where it fails, go back and fix it. That's the way you do
100%
this, right?
agree.
How do you eat a moose? One bite at a time. Right?
Yeah. Or a reindeer.
Reindeer, yeah.
No, I get it. I was like,
yeah. I can tell you didn't get it to start with. You're like, when the orders come in, and I'm thinking they're not getting orders.
Yeah.
All right,
What
guys,
business? Okay.
we're going to wrap this up. Dan, any
governance-
final thoughts from the DVA?
The governance
Any
needs to be there to determine whether it's a coal or a piece of coal or not, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you don't want to
true.
bite into a piece of coal. That doesn't taste too good.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas from Data Vault Alliance, and we hope to see you out there. Our forums are free, just as one of our memberships is free, so you can get access to a whole host of content. Again, presentations from the business all the way to the technical from past conferences. They're phenomenal. Get out there and get involved.
Yeah. And look, thanks for joining everyone today. I think this shows there's a huge community of people that exist to support you on your Data Vault journey. So, thanks for watching. Thanks for those that send in questions. I really appreciate all of your time. I know that this is a very intelligent group, and I feel a little bit dwarfed by the luminaries, but I appreciate your time, all three of you, and have a very Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas, guys.
Take care.
Thank you.